Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Today is, I believe it's the 19th or the 20th of July, 2025. It is a Sunday. I've released my video for today already. I'm going to get a little bit ahead of the game. There's going to be a spiritual gathering on the 23rd, 24th, and 25th of July. I'll make one more announcement on the 22nd in 2 days. Well, this will probably be up. This will be up on the 21st, so I'll make an announcement again tomorrow. Those of you who are interested in it, I'll explain what's going on or how to participate in that gathering. And then there'll be weekly, or there'll be 3 updates on the days after the gathering on the Gratefullness meditation channel, just my perception of the sittings and things like that. But anyways, this video's about what are our other options? Because this is where most people just crumble when they find out that the system is completely fucked, which is what we're finding out. Let's start here with Candace Owens. There's another, a bigger video about this. Well, I'll get to that in a moment. Jeffrey Epstein's ex-girlfriend talking about Trump. But let's start here.
All right, you guys, happy Thursday. And I should ask the question, where are my fellow weaklings at? Because that's what Trump called us yesterday, right? He also, during a press conference, said that we were stupid for still caring about the Epstein files. So I think now we're arriving at the important question here, which is, who is Trump protecting? Because he's
Okay, that's stupid. You know, Trump isn't protecting anybody. He's protecting himself, more than likely, and the system. But it's not about any of those things, right? Like, they never get it, the mainstream pundits like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, because all these people, I don't know how many millions of views she's getting on these videos. I'll check this in a moment. But, well, let's listen to the other part of this here.
Clearly protecting someone. Is it himself? Is it someone in his family? We should explore that as we continue to notice patterns. Welcome back to the Epstein files.
Okay. I'm going to move ahead here for a second.
Regarding the quote-unquote hoax. Take a listen.
I know you want to move past all this intrigue over the Epstein files, but I do want to ask you to clarify something you said this morning. You said this was all a hoax. Has your attorney
It's a big hoax.
told you this was a hoax? What evidence?
It's a big, giant fucking hoax.
No, it's not the Attorney General. No, I know it's a hoax. It's started by Democrats. It's been run by the Democrats for 4 years. You had Christopher Wray and these characters and Comey before him. And it's a bad group. It started, actually, look at the Steele dossier. That turned out to be a total hoax.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with it. It has zero to do with Epstein. Not why I'm showing you this, right?
51 agents, the intelligence, so-called intelligence agents, it was a hoax. It's all been a big hoax. It's perpetrated by the Democrats. And some stupid Republicans and foolish Republicans fall into the net. And so they try and do the Democrats' work.
Look, I'm happy to be stupid. I'm happy to be foolish. I was very happy to be a person in the basket of the deplorables. The ad hominem stuff doesn't mean anything to me, especially when it comes to a ring that involves harming children. Okay? I just think that this is so ridiculous to try to divide people and make it seem like it's a fight between the left and the right. It's not that. We are, in fact, not stupid, but we're happy to have you call those names. And when I hear him say that, it just inspires me more to look into this. I really think that nothing should commit us further to wanting to unpack the Epstein story than the amount of gaslighting that is currently taking place.
Okay. This isn't about unpacking the Epstein story, right? Like, why she is doing this is because, let me switch over to a voiceover. So the majority of truthers out there, certainly these right-wing truthers, certainly people who are as popular as Candace Owens, these people who are, she's got 1.4 million views on that, and I don't know where else she puts up her shit. The Joe Rogans, the fake, the mainstream people who lean a little bit into the truth community. But people in general, there's a few reasons for this. Because the biggest reason is they're unwilling to admit that this means that we're completely fucked, right? As a system. that the system that they're profiting off of, the system they're a part of, the system that they have a prominent position in, even people who have, relatively good jobs as right-wing truthers or just truthers in general that are fairly popular, and they like making videos, and they like covering this stuff. Well, let's just go deeper into the Epstein files. Are you fucking serious, right? Because they're unwilling to admit this, that there is no solution. There is no answer here. There's nothing certainly politically, but, people aren't good enough to reverse what's happening here. I mean, it's not just the Epstein thing. That's just a small part of it. But what the Epstein thing says to all these people that still had some ridiculous, silly hope, some hopium that they were smoking about Donald J. Trump, that somehow he was different than the average politician, and that he was gonna fulfill his promises, make good on his promises that not only he made, but the people that he was appointing to these positions made, and that the people who were a part of the Epstein debacle situation, the customers of Jeffrey Epstein, would be called out and then would be prosecuted just like everybody else would. Because the reality of it is, there's people who still want to see Hillary go to jail. There's people who might want to see Bill Clinton go to jail. Whatever it is, Tom Hanks, any of these number of people that they believe in who are part of this thing, right? This human trafficking, Pizzagate kind of stuff. But it isn't really specific people as much as any fucking buddy. Like, it's not just getting like a sacrificial lamb. They want lots of fucking names. They want to be told that there is these elite group of people who partake in bullshit like this, the deplorable shit like this, and that Trump was going to come in here. And, he's not talking about cleaning up the swamp like he did his first term, because he is the swamp. But just show us a part of the swamp and, do something about it, right? Like, that's what people are wanting to see, not me. But people in the truth community that are right-wing people, Jeffrey Epstein people, Cubies, all these types of people. Just expose part of the swamp, name fucking names, point out some of the creatures in the swamp, name names, who they are, and then make them suffer the same way, the consequences that average people would suffer. That there isn't some sort of elite people, shadow government people that are above the law and who treat everyone else like they're cattle, like they're goy, like they're, people to be exploited and manipulated, enslaved, right? All these things. And he didn't deliver that, right? Now, he wasn't ever going to deliver that because he is the swamp. Trump is as bad as anybody, and the Epstein thing is as much about him as anybody else, which I said in my 2 videos ago. But that's not what that's about. It's not about any of these things, because what do we now know from the last 2 administrations? Now, people have lost faith in Congress, in the legislative body. Many people have lost faith in the Supreme Court in one way or another over the years. Of course, with the abortion ruling, some of the Republicans have, regained some faith in that bit. But it really didn't stop abortion. It really hasn't done much to change it. Just made it more inconvenient, right? And so, these legislative bodies and the presidency has been degraded and been, you go through the Bill Clinton era and the George W. Bush era and the George H.W. Bush era. You go through all these presidents, Nixon, all of them. Reagan was senile, and he was fucking an actor and a bad one. And, people would, in a partisan way, feel like they had a little bit of a better guy when their guy was in. People who were Democrats thought the Democrats were a little bit better. People who thought the Republicans were there were a little bit better. And that overall there are people in the government and the media that weren't bad people, and that they were going to keep the country from going completely south, even though we saw this ever-degrading country, right? But we saw with Trump in his first term, especially at the end of it, when COVID happened, which was, everybody fucking kind of knows that COVID was a complete hoax. Everybody gets a sense that there might be some side effects with the vaccines. People know someone who's vaccine injured, and the media isn't even talking about that. And, you're kind of allowed to talk about it now on social media, but still, it's not it's not something where it's, anything but just talk, right? And, the way the economy has gone since then, the debt, Elon Musk coming in and saying, well, we're going to be insolvent, we'll be bankrupt if we don't do something, but it's already bankrupt. People see the ever-growing debt, and the ever doubling debt is going up by $3 trillion a year, and there's no way of getting it back down. And so there's nothing that you can do about that. You're going to lose Social Security. People all kind of sense all those things. But when Trump went out the way he went out, there were people who, maybe some Republicans and certainly a lot of Democrats, who thought Joe Biden was going to restore some sort of sanity to whatever Trump was doing. And it comes out, the way Joe Biden goes out, that everybody kind of knows that he's senile. Over 80% of the population knew that the guy was mentally unfit. And I don't know what a fucking 20% was doing in terms of smoking crack or what. But Joe Biden said that he was a stopgap president, that he wasn't going to run for a second term. I mean, he made these promises. But then he got shitty about it, when he had that meltdown on that debate where there was that moment where I show everybody, let me put the moment in here, the moment where Biden and Trump, you could see that the country was over. It should have been the moment where everyone should have been like, oh, yeah, we're fucked. Here's the clip here. This is when the apocalypse is upon us, right? This great moment here.
What do you say to voters who have concerns about your capabilities to serve?
Well, I took 2 tests, cognitive tests. I aced them, both of them, as you know.
Okay, so the doctor who was on MSNBC, I've shown this video a number of times, that said Joe Biden obviously has Parkinson's. This is a Parkinson's doctor. Remember, a Parkinson's doctor showed up at the White House like 8 or 9 times in 1 year. And so there was speculation about him having Parkinson's, so they brought a Parkinson's expert in. And he talked about his gait, the way he's turned sideways, not like he turns his neck, but he turns his whole body. These are signs of Parkinson's. Like they're symptoms. He said a first-year medical student should be able to just look at Joe Biden and diagnose him with Parkinson's, right? And the guy said that Trump's tests that he took, they're 4-hour tests that you have to take. It's a grueling 4-hour test. And Trump took these weak little tests, right? Because his cognitive issues are there. They're not nearly as bad as Joe Biden's, but they're there. There's decline there. We see it. And so
we made it public. He took none. I'd like to see him take one, just one, a real easy one. Like go through the first 5 questions.
Look, that's the way he's turning. Look at him.
Wouldn't do it. But I took 2 cognitive tests. I took physical exams every year. And, we knock on wood wherever we may have wood, that I'm in very good health. I just won 2 club championships, not even senior, 2 regular club championships. To do that, you have to be...
You mean your club? You won championships at your Mar-a-Lago club. You won 2 golf champions at your own club. Right? I just won 2 club championships at a club that I own. And I'm an ex-president. And, I'm Donald Trump. And miraculously, I won.
Quite smart, and you have to be able to hit the ball a long way. And I do it. He doesn't do it. He can't hit a ball 50 yards. He challenged me to a golf match. He can't hit a ball 50 yards. I think I'm in very good shape. I feel that I'm as in good a shape as I was 25, 30 years ago. Actually, I'm probably a little bit lighter, but I'm in as good a shape as I was years ago. I feel very good. I feel the same. But I was willing to take a cognitive test. And you know what? If I didn't do well, I aced him. Dr. Ronnie Jackson, who's a great guy, when he was White House...
He aced the cognitive test.
Doctor. And then I took another one, a similar one. And one of them said they've never seen anybody ace him.
Thank you. President Biden?
You can see he is 6'5" and only 223 pounds, or 235 pounds.
Remember, he's...
You said 6'4", 200. Well, anyway, that's what you're... Anyway, just take a look at what he says he is, and take a look at what he is. Look, I'd be happy to have a driving contest with him. I got my handicap, which when I was vice president, down to a 6. But by the way, I told you before, I'm happy to play golf if you carry your own bag. Think you can do it?
That's the biggest lie that he's a 6 handicap of all.
I was an 8 handicap.
Yeah.
8.
Never.
But I have, you know how many?
I've seen you swing. I know you swing.
Okay, let's
you know,
not
you know how
act
many
like
rounds-
children.
President Trump, we're going to
21
turn.
Let's not act like children.
Let's not act like children. Like, holy shit. Let's not act like children. The thing about it is that you have the two oldest candidates in history here. And they're debating, and the world's in chaos and crisis. And we all know what's happened since then and what was going on at that time and what was being talked about. And these guys are debating their fucking golf game, right? Like, it's just, and then Trump saying, let's not act like children. You guys are children. Like, they're both the same guy. They're both really immature. And, you know, there's no greatness here. You know, we need greatness. You know, I've said this over and over again in various videos that, you know, where is better going to come from? Where is our greatness going to come from? And I asked people in a video title, why would God want to save this country? Like, if you're being honest about what's going on in this country, we're going in the wrong fucking direction. You know, this is so low vibration. It's just so low consciousness. It's like we're heading into the abyss of stupidity and immaturity, right? And it's both guys. Like, it's the best that America has to offer in terms of presidential candidates. Who was it? Hickey Haley or J.D. Vance for Trump, or Kamala Harris or Gavin Newsom, right? Like, these are your options. Like, there's no greatness anywhere. There's nobody like you would say, oh, this person's special. And even if they were, we're fucked. Like, the debt, and we're talking about the debt. Elon Musk, you know, admitted that we're going to go bankrupt, but what he should have said is we're bankrupt already. We're insolvent. And so, you know, now I made this original clip came out of a video about war with Iran. You know, today's Wednesday, June 18th. And so, you know, this is Israel going into war with Iran and whether America would get involved. Like, that's what we're talking about today. And there's nothing here. And so when, you know, these two motherfuckers start debating about their golf game in the middle of a presidential debate, and one of them, the one who's probably a little bit more childish, two childish, arrogant, egotistical pricks, says, let's not act like children, you know, while the other guy is having a mental breakdown because he has had Parkinson's and has prostate cancer, like late stage prostate cancer, right? It's gone into his bones, and he's had it through his whole presidency, where he's not even acting as a president because he's mentally incompetent. Like, you know, where's the greatness? Like, where's the moment? Like, who's going to step up to the moment? There is none, right? Like, even just as a performance, just as an actor, not even as a real president, just as an actor, come through and deliver a masterful performance that would lead people to believe in America and all these things. But, you know, it's just so low fucking vibration, so low consciousness. So that should have been the moment, right? Both people. Like, you should look at these two people going, oh my God, what the fuck are we doing here, right? There's no political solution. And when Joe Biden, it came out that he was, you know, that he had all this, that he had dementia and that he had prostate cancer, the Democratic voters should realize they were fucked over. That Kamala Harris was a disaster, all the things that came out about her campaign, the Democratic Party, I mean, even after Barack Obama, that the Democratic Party was completely corrupted. They lied to you, gaslit you, and did all these various things. But now Candace Owens, one of Trump's staunchest supporters, is now saying he's gaslighting them, which he is, and that he's protecting the elite, that the majority of the Republicans, certainly the ones who are thoughtful and more investigative, wanted some answers about the Jeffrey Epstein thing. You know, and for the Democrats, they acted so selfishly, Joe Biden and the rest of the media, and they set this up so Trump would have a second term, which both sides were saying that if the other side wins, it's the end of the world. I mean, they're both fucking campaigning on preventing the apocalypse. And so when you look at these, not just these candidates, but the political party and the state of the media, and, you know, Trump was the last refuge of hope, that he was somehow an outsider, somehow a guy who couldn't be bought, some guy who was actually willing to take on the oligarchs and the elite. I mean, it's silly because he's so elite and he's so elitist. He's not only elite, but he's elitist. And he's a wannabe. I mean, he wants to be more elite, right? He wants to be a part of the club he's not allowed into and never will be into. But now that's the end of it. There's no investigative journalism, because why are you investigating Epstein if no one's going to prosecute him? You think by our knowledge of Epstein, you want to look under every fucking rock and find out every little, nook and cranny of his finances, and this is what Tucker Carlson's doing, and doing a deep dive into this shit's going to make a difference? It's just going to degrade people. It's going to have people think about the devil instead of God, right? The devil in all forms. It's looking at the devil. It's looking at the demons. It's looking at the bad people and focusing on the bad people. It's putting the bad people at the center of your existence, which Trump has been for so many years, and meditating on them and absorbing all their evil and thinking about their evil deeds instead of looking at what to do. It's looking at what not to do, which is the whole problem behind the internet and every fucking person out there that loves the fucking darkness. People love the darkness. Most of you love the darkness. You want to fucking wallow in the fucking darkness, right? That's the whole problem with all of this. People want to wallow in the darkness because if you hear all this and you're a healthy person, if you come to the realization that you're a healthy person, that the system is completely fucked and we can't fix it, you would say, what are my other options? What are my other fucking options? Are my other options now I just helplessly flounder around and look into Jeffrey Epstein and any number of other scandals and listen to these fucking morons tell me about the depravity of other people? Is that my other option now that I can't, just to participate blindly in a system anymore, that voting and, doing what Americans are supposed to do is no longer an option because you know that the fucking system is rigged, is contaminated by evil people, not just some deep state, but the whole thing's a deep state, right? Deep state of fucking demonic energy and demonic consciousness. Demonic consciousness and devil consciousness is the ego run amok, going and subverting God's will. And so now that you know it, now that you know there's no fucking hope, there's no one coming to rescue you, and the system is just going south as quickly as possible. My wife and I often will have lunch and we'll watch Impractical Jokers. So we have them recorded. We both like the show. It's funny and, it's interesting at various levels. And there was something from season 10. And, I think it was the second episode of the season 10. And there was this challenge where these guys are, they're preparing cartoons for each other, sabotaging them. And there's a panel of 3 young people that have to vote on which is the better of the 2 cartoons, right? Again, they're being sabotaged. So this one Impractical Joker named Joe he's been kicked off the show, and it seems like he got divorced at the same time, and he was either cheating with other women and maybe with some 18-year-old girl. There's something there. It got covered up pretty well, but he's got kicked off the show. But before he got kicked off the show, it was his turn, and the other guy, Murray, wrote his cartoon for him. And the cartoon was the We Don't Care Bears. And it was a bunch of depressed loser bears that just have given up. One of the bears was don't give up, and it just peed. It's got a puddle of urine underneath it. And it's just, completely defeated. Why even bother trying? Life sucks. And this was supposed to be a cartoon for kids. And the panelists, 2 of them said, oh, I would watch that one right now. These were young people, right? These were this younger generation. They're supposed to be offended by this thing. They said, I would watch that one right now. And one girl said, I can't believe this doesn't exist already. And so as an older generation, they thought that this would be something that people would say, oh, why are you making this cartoon? It was supposed to be a joke, right? But these young people embraced it because that's where they're at. They're all broken. They're all sad. They're all depressed. And they don't want these bears that can do anything. They don't want to see successful people. They want to wallow in their misery and their lack of a future, right? And so the other two Impractical Jokers come up, and one of them has "Fuck you, Mom." It's supposed to be based in Britain. It's a cartoon based in Britain where this kid says, "Shut the fuck up, Mom," and that's the name of the show. And when he says, "Shut the fuck up, Mom," and when he says this to his mother, she loses the ability to speak. And the whole thing was this kid has the power to tell people to shut the fuck up and they can no longer speak, right? And the other guy, his proposal is that there is this creature that's like a claw who takes good people and bad kids, and eats them, cannibalizes the kids. So this is the cartoon. That there's some creature, it's like, Krampus, from, the Christmas character Krampus, right? And he takes these kids and eats them, cannibal. And they picked that one as the better of the two shows because they couldn't handle a kid that would say, "Shut the fuck up, Mom," and take away other people's voices. They thought that was worse than cannibalism, than child cannibalism. These kids who have been so indoctrinated that words are so powerful. And they think that a story about bears that have completely given up on life is actually a good, workable project, and kids should see that cartoon. And the choice between a creature that cannibalizes kids and a kid that says "shut the fuck up" to his mom, that the cannibalization is somehow a better show than the other one, because that's where these kids are at right now. And you see it all the time. And so we know each generation's getting worse, and we're going in the wrong fucking direction. Our country's bankrupt, and our politicians and everybody's fucked. And so what are our other options? What else can you do with your life? If the American dream is dead, and it was never really a proper dream, it was never anything that was great, what are your other options, right? What can you do? What can anybody do, right? So if saving the system that we're 100% dependent on is off the table, right? You know that now. Like, everyone should know that. This is not going to be saved. If it's going to crumble, it's going to crumble. And there are so many different reasons why it should crumble or should have already crumbled, right? And it's crumbling now. But whether it's crumbling or not crumbling, it's out of your hands. Certainly voting isn't going to change anything. Now, you could vote if you thought a candidate might deliver something to you specifically that would benefit you, like, less taxes or some bullshit thing like that. But really, it's just 100% about you and you hoping that the candidate might follow through on one of their promises. But other than that, there's no reason to delve into politics at all. It's boring. The people suck. If you look at any of the House testimony or the Senate hearings, they're just deplorables, and they're just full of shit, and it's just, they don't even act like humans, right? Like, we know the mainstream media has just crumbled because nobody wants to watch it because it's just not authentic. So politics and mainstream media, all that shit's unauthentic, other than mocking it or laughing at it, which you could do as a pastime, which I often do. I do here, at least as part of my job. But in terms of all that, there's nothing there. So you can throw all that. That's a waste of your time. You need to know what you need to know. And other than that, it's not, why even bother watching any of that or caring about it or even hearing authentic people talk about it when it has nothing to do with any kind of solution or anything that's going to help you one way or another. So then what are your other options? Like, all right, you have this time period between when the system collapses and when, between now and when it collapses. And other than that, you have to figure out another purpose for life. I always talk about the spiritual one, find the divinity within you, which is why I can talk about this and Candace Owens can't, because they're still tied to their bullshit religions or their other kind of stuff. But in terms of all the rest of it, you have to figure something out. Are you going to start gardening? What are you going to do with your time? How are you going to focus your time and energy? Because it's no longer, worth watching this thing, right? I mean, you can laugh at it, you can make an entertainment out of it, which I do here. But then, what about your serious part of your orientation to the world in life? What's your purpose? Why are you here? When the system itself no longer represents anything that you believe in. And so that's the problem with all these people. They're not willing to call it and call it what it is. It's over. It's fucking, there's no reason to even pay attention to this anymore because, we all know how this is going to play out the same way it's played out every other time for the past presidencies and all these politicians and politics and news media and news cycles. It's going in one direction, and that direction is all pointing to that the system's fucked. And when it collapses, it collapses. In the meantime, you have this period of time to make something of yourself and, change what you're doing. And why not do that? You really need to hear the fucking details of Jeffrey Epstein? Like, what the fuck, right? Like, come on. Like, be realistic about what the fuck's going on here. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter because, even if the story is 100% true and Candace Owens or someone else nails it exactly, gets all the deep dirt, gets all the details, it's going nowhere. That means you know something. You just know that this guy got away with it, or the people did, or whatever it is. And the system itself is rewarding sociopaths, which is all the things we already know, because we've seen it over and over again. Why are you watching the same fucking show and the same movie time and time again, expecting different results? Anyways, with that in mind, let's get to this other piece here because this is equally as interesting.
Jeffrey Epstein's ex-girlfriend speaking out tonight. Stacey Williams, a former Sports Illustrated model who dated Epstein in the early 90s, has spent time with both Epstein and Donald Trump together. In one disturbing alleged incident, which Williams went public with last year before the presidential election, Williams says Trump groped her in front of Epstein at Trump Tower in 1993. Here's what she told our Sunland Serfati when she first broke her silence.
The second he was in front of me, he pulled me into him, and his hands were just on me and didn't come off. Then the hands started moving, and they were on the side of my breasts, on my hips, back down to my butt, back up, sort of. Then they were just on me the whole time, and I froze.
Williams also claimed that Epstein and Trump looked at each other and smiled during the alleged incident, which Williams says she now believes was coordinated and, quote, some kind of weird, twisted game. Trump denied.
Okay, so I want to get into Trump's creepiness as we move forward here. But I had a connection to this thing that I hadn't remembered. I actually had talked about this with my wife a couple weeks ago. I mean, a connection in terms of a memory of this woman who's talking here, the Sports Illustrated thing, which I'll get into in a moment. And it's kind of almost a Mandela effect, and I'll show you that in a second. But at this point, Trump is not to be believed by Trumpers. Like, Trumpers won't believe Trump. So these allegations, these people that came out, these women that came out, saying that he groped them, now become more credible because Trump's base has crumbled on him, and everybody else. I'll get to the polling data of this thing. Well, maybe we should do that first. Let's break into that, and I'll come back to this story here. So here, let's watch this.
Polls show that Americans are paying attention to the recent revelations in the Epstein case. CNN chief data analyst Harry Enton now with what the numbers tell us about how the public and the president's base feel about the story that won't seem to go away.
Interest in the Epstein files and the Epstein case is sky high, and the American public does not.
So they had this guy on MSNBC. They used to have this guy, John King, do their data points. But now they have this guy because they had an annoying guy on MSNBC. And this guy's almost a clone of him. These two dying networks copying each other.
Not trust what the government is selling them. What are we talking about here? Is the government hiding Epstein's alleged client? Let's get this. 69% of Americans agree that the federal...
No, I don't know what the other 31 are in terms of the people. But these are bad numbers. This is Joe Biden's senile numbers. When you get into the 70% of this thing, right?
government is, in fact, hiding Epstein's alleged client list versus just 6 6% who say that they are not. And get this, a majority of Republicans and Democrats do in
So
fact.
there's the 6%. There's only 6% say they're not. Like those people, I mean, 6% are just completely, I mean, whatever their brain dead level is, because this is like an obvious one. Like, I don't know what's going on in terms of whether this is staged or not or whatever. I always assume stuff is staged. I always assume you're seeing something for a reason. And if there's a reason and they're taking down Trump and he doesn't like it, like he's not in on it, like that would be what we're seeing here if there was, whatever. But, 6% is nothing. So that means that 94% of the people are like, this is fucked.
Agree on this issue that the government is hiding Epstein's alleged client list. You can never get a majority of Republicans and Democrats to agree on anything, but they do agree on this particular issue. And perhaps not so surprisingly, you get a plurality of Democrats and Republicans agreeing that they are dissatisfied with the amount of information that the government has released so far. What are we talking about this? Well, we're talking about, if we look at Republicans and independents who lean Republican, 43% are dissatisfied with the amount of information released so far, compared to, get this, just 4% of Republicans.
Now, these are horrible numbers. The question had always been, what would it take for the Trumpers to leave Trump? And it turns out the answer is the Epstein files, right? Now, anything that happens when you're in doubt of somebody, like anything that happens, anything they release on the Epstein files that has Trump's name on it, they'll be like, well, this is why they didn't release it. It's going to be bigger than it is because Trump now owns this thing. And he can't get it back because what he would have to do is produce a list, at least for his base, that would incriminate lots of people. I mean, there would have to be a long list of people, and there'd have to be evidence, and there'd have to be like a bombshell reveal, which he can't deliver because, you can't lose that much faith in the government. I mean, it just can't happen. And, Israel, him being Mossad, all these things. Whatever information they have that people would now need to see to believe Trump is, on the up and up, he can't deliver. He can't give that to them. So they're going to pin this on him, that he was covering up for himself, and then the Israel thing's being played out, which I'll talk about in a bit, with Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson at least, and probably other people. And so Trump can't deliver to them what they want. So this is like, I don't know if they just give up on this because I don't see it happening, right? It doesn't seem like the Republicans are ever going to forgive Trump for this. So anything that happens with these revelations, people are going to believe in them.
Satisfied with the amount of information released so far by the federal government when it comes to the Epstein case. And we look over here on this side of the screen among Democrats. Get this, 60% of Democrats and independent-leaning Democrats are, in fact, dissatisfied with the amount of information released so far. And get this, just 3% of Democrats are, in fact, satisfied so far with the amount of information released. Now, you see this. You see that the plurality of Republicans are dissatisfied. So how is it impacting President Trump's overall approval rating? Republicans who approve of the job that Donald Trump is doing. Get this, in our CNN SSRS poll, it was 86% prior to this whole Epstein saga. Now, it's 88%. In fact, the percentage of Republicans who approve of the job that Donald Trump is doing has actually, if anything, climbed a little bit according to our CNN polling. How about Quinnipiac? 87% before this whole Epstein.
So that's completely fucked, right? So then this came up. I'm editing now, so let me put this in here. But this is so fucked up that Trump's approval rating has gone up amongst the Republicans. Like, it's just like the dumb fuck Republicans. How do you, be so upset about the Epstein thing and somehow think Trump's doing a great job?
Here to really take a little bit of a successful bow. The
Wait, that's not like you at all, bro.
production that we had over the last 6 months was spectacular. And just a few weeks ago, we had the biggest victory of them all when you passed the one big beautiful bill.
It's a horrible fucking bill.
And the law. I think we have a chance in the midterms. I don't understand why they say that when you win the presidency, you always almost automatically lose the midterms, because nobody's had a more successful period of time than we have. So based on that, we should do great, and we'll see.
We'll see. That was President Trump giving a speech to fellow Republican lawmakers as he marked the 6-month.
Here it is here. My poll numbers within the Republican Party and MAGA have gone up significantly since the Jeffrey Epstein hoax was exposed by the radical left Democrats and just plain troublemakers. They have hit 90, 92, 93, and 95 in various polls and are all Republican Party records. The general election numbers are my highest ever. People like strong borders and all the many things I've done. God bless America, MAGA. So, I mean, Jesus Christ. The Republican at least the Biden people bailed on Biden. You know, they never felt about Biden the way the Trumpers feel about Trump. But these guys are leading, this Judas goat is leading these motherfuckers over the cliff, and they're too stupid to fucking know it, even when they're upset about the Jeffrey. So, well, I mean, just whatever. Let's move on. But that's just, I mean, there's no real reason. Like, again, none of this stuff matters. But just have some fucking for self-respect and dignity. And just, you've been punked and duped and fucking lied to by this piece of shit who's, you know, him and Jeffrey Epstein are clearly besties. And you're fucking, are you serious? Are you fucking... And poll numbers are never to be trusted, but I kind of think this is probably true. That somehow they're upset about the Jeffrey Epstein thing, and yet they are, not blaming Trump when Trump is the number one person here. He was Jeffrey Epstein's best friend when Jeffrey Epstein was in his heyday of abusing young women, and like I said we'll talk about this later. The whole thing about man boy lover, which I'll cover in a bit. But this is I mean, Jesus, how is it possible that his approval rating is going up with Republicans? It's, I mean, that's just, maybe this thing doesn't get Trump, right? But these people are now, we'll see what happens. He certainly lost his water carriers, at least in terms of, they're not going to go Democrat, which, but anyways, let's get into this thing here.
Denied Williams's allegations through his campaign at the time, which said in part, quote, "It's obvious this fake story was contrived by Kamala Harris's campaign." And Stacey Williams is out front now to speak out for the first time since the uproar over Trump's handling of the Epstein case. Stacey, thank you so much for joining us tonight. As you know, Epstein is dominating the news once again, and his relationship with Trump is under scrutiny. While you were dating Epstein, can you tell us how close these two men were?
They were best friends. I dated Jeffrey for a period of more or less, I think about 4 or 5 months. And the only friend that he would mention every time we saw each other or had a phone conversation was Donald. And he would share a lot of anecdotes. I have plenty of anecdotes. And yeah, they were very close, and they were up to no good.
They were up to no good. They were close, and they were up to no good. Now, anybody who dates Jeffrey Epstein has zero credibility as a person, right? Like, you just don't. Like, none of these people really have credibility because they're in that fucking bizarre world. The girls that they recruited, certainly, that's a little bit different. But she is willfully dating Jeffrey freaking Epstein as a 20-something-year-old model, right?
And how did Epstein talk about Trump? Sort of what was the quality of those anecdotes and how he described him?
Well, there was a time when he mentioned that he had to check in on him because he was unwell and very upset about something that had happened. I remember because he was late to pick me up and he was explaining why he was late. They were just, it was such a long time ago, but it was just that was his bro, that was his wingman. It was clearly, I'd hear about Ghislaine and I'd hear about Jeffrey. And I met Ghislaine in his house. She would come wafting.
It's pronounced Ghislaine.
In and out. The home in New York. So he was clearly just someone that he talked about all the time. And again, I met Jeffrey the second time and we started dating based on the reintroduction that happened at the Plaza Hotel at a Christmas party in 1992 that Donald Trump threw. And they were very, very close.
So let's talk about this incident, alleged incident in 1993, where you say that Trump groped you in front of Epstein. I do want to note that CNN has spoken to 3 friends of yours who confirmed that you told them about this alleged incident over past decades. Can you
3 friends confirmed it. It's confirmed by 3. It's got to be confirmed by at least 3 friends.
tell me more about what happened that day and particularly how Trump and Epstein interacted?
I mean, these friends, they wouldn't lie about her telling about in the 90s. I totally believe it happened because it sounds real, but like whatever, it's just, there's no, this is whether Trump's believable to the base anymore. Whether the base is going to watch CNN about this thing. But anything that comes out about this now, we have the Trump former employee that said, he had to tell Trump that Epstein was a bad influence on him, and they were besties. So we're hearing that they were like really close. They were hanging out all the time. And that was that quote that Trump gave in 2003 about how Jeffrey Epstein was a terrific guy because they were like real friends, billionaire buddies who did depraved things. And, Trump would be then the number 1 guy on Jeffrey Epstein's list, even before he was president, because they were like really hanging out all the time. I mean, that's the picture that's being painted. And like, how did he not avoid this fucking thing in one way or another? Like, for them to come out and say, "Oh, you guys are all wrong." I mean, it shows you how lack of understanding. Now, Trump has been great at telling the base, right-wing dummies, right-wing dumb fucks, that what they want to hear and validating them. He's been great at figuring out what they want to hear and saying it to them. But he's never figured out the importance of the Epstein thing. I mean, it's just bizarre that he would roll, Pam Bondi out to tell those people they've been wrong and then try to tell them it was a Democratic ploy. The Democrats were pushing this thing. It's just bizarre.
Yeah, before I get into the details of what happened, which, obviously I told you guys and I've shared with multiple outlets, the specifics of the assault that happened, I want to point out that I was polygraphed before I did all this by one of the most renowned examiners in the world.
Sounds like Donald Trump, like the best polygrapher in the world.
Michael Wolff has hundreds of hours of interviews with Jeffrey Epstein where Jeffrey confirmed to Michael what the 2 of them did to me long before I came out and told you all of this. So those are 2 critical data points that you need to have, and now I'll walk you through what happened. I was dating Jeffrey. He was always talking about Donald. It was his bestie and everything, and he was joking about how
Bestie.
Donald thought I was hot, and Donald thinks I'm this or whatever, wants to talk to you. And he was telling me this as we were taking a walk down Fifth Avenue one day. And he said, let's stop in and see him at his offices. So we went up to his office.
Now, there's a famous quote from Donald Trump saying he could go out on Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody in the face. That she would bring up Fifth Avenue. That's why she had to go to Fifth Avenue to go to his office. But anyways.
Trump Tower. And within a couple of minutes, Donald was outside of his door, and his hands were all over me. They were on my breasts, they were on my butt, they were on, my hips, up and down, while the 2 of them just kept having a normal conversation. I don't remember exactly what was in the conversation. Again, this was, we're talking 90, this is 93 now. It was something about, it was irrelevant. It was like, oh, Stacey's career's on fire. She just did Sports Illustrated again, blah, 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 blah. And they were back and forth, smiling and grinning and carrying on a conversation while Donald ran his hands all over me. And, when that happens in broad daylight in someone's office and an assistant's walking back and forth, you're in shock. If it happens in a dark alleyway, right, you defend yourself. But when it's hidden in its brazenness like that, which is Donald Trump's forte, you go into shock. So I froze, and it was over and very quickly. It was a few minutes, and then we got back in the elevator, and Jeffrey's energy had changed. He was like seething. He was enraged. He wouldn't make eye contact with me.
Jeffrey was mad.
And then we got out on the street on Fifth Avenue, and he looked at me and he just started yelling at me, saying, "Why did you let him do that?" And he was so enraged. And then I remember thinking, like, why did I? I felt like I was coming back into my body at that moment, and I was confused. So that's the story of the assault.
And I do just want to note, Stacey, that Trump has denied these allegations, which you are
Trump denied them. It's crazy.
Aware of. And I know at times you've referenced videos which we have not confirmed the existence of. But I know that you felt that this was coordinated later when you looked back on it. What was it that made you draw that conclusion?
Well, I was sort of known in the industry for being somewhat combative with photographers who would expose themselves or do inappropriate things, or even guys who would touch or harass on the streets. And Jeffrey was aware of that. And I think he was excited. I think the gist in my mind, given what he knew and the way it played out, was, hey, I'm going to deliver this person to you who's actually not going to let you get away with what you do. And I did, because I froze. Like I said, when it's hidden
The thing about
in its brazenness like that, you freeze. And
the thing about freezing, like things that are abnormal and you're not prepared for. This is like, any number of things in life. When you used to do fire drills when you were, in school. It's good to have some sort of muscle memory and practice. In all these kind of situations, right? My dog's having like a nightmare right now. I only have one dog up in the bed today. My dog Lucy used to run at the border collie. She'd be on her side running in her sleep, like her legs were moving and things. But anyways, it's good to have some sense of not, like if you're in a state of shock, then you need to like take a pause and just like come back. When things are happening, because that's what criminals and that's what, people want. They want you to feel like you're not aware of you, like you leave your body and, whatever kind of thing that is, that's what they're hoping for. That you'll be stunned, which would be a thing Donald Trump is. I mean, this is a kind of story you hear over and over with Trump, right? Where he does something like with shock value, and the people don't know how to deal with it. This happens politically. It happens all the time where Trump does something and says something and people don't know how to deal with it because it's not socially appropriate. He does this when he meets with people and these other things.
He's a master of that. So, I mean, he talked about it, right? He talked about pussy grabbing on the Access Hollywood tape.
Pussy grabbing.
And tonight, if you're aware, President Trump has filed this libel lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal over its reporting that there was this note bearing Trump's name as a signature and an outline of a naked woman that was included in a 50th birthday album for Epstein in 2003, a note that also depicted an imaginary conversation between the two men. And part of it reads, quote, Donald saying, "We have certain things in common, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, yes, we do. Come to think of it, Donald, enigmas never age. Have you noticed that? Jeffrey, as a matter of fact, it was clear to me that the last time I saw you." And then finally, Donald, "A pal is a wonderful thing. Happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret." Trump called that letter fake. He said it was out of character for him because he never wrote a picture or drew a picture in his life. Wrote a picture, I think he said.
No,
it's not his kind of language. Based on your time with both men, does that sound out of character to you?
What, are you kidding me? I know what they were up to together. It happened to me. I was polygraphed. I have the post-assault postcard with a love note. So I have the receipts. Where are Donald Trump's receipts? Where are they? I know what they're up together, and I know what that means. It's very clear. It wasn't baking or fishing.
Oh, they weren't baking or fishing. Can rule those two out. So I remember this woman's name. And let me move over to another video clip here. So HBO had this. This is her. Had this thing that they used to do. There's a music playing, so I'll get back to it. But had a thing they did on the Sports Illustrated, whatever swimsuit models. HBO had some agreement with Sports Illustrated, and I watched this thing. And I was just telling my wife about this. I've actually told this story before in maybe the Journey series or whatever. But when I was growing up, women were marketed in a certain way, right? Like it's completely different now for kids these days with the feminist movement and things like that, right? But there's, now of course kids grow up being sexualized by internet porn. And for my generation, the Sports Illustrated models, they had these pinup girls when the 40s and 50s, like when my siblings grew up, right? And the way that women are marketed to men. And the Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition was this big thing, because men in general didn't pay attention to the model in industry, but it was a sports-oriented thing, and it was, I think, the number one sold issue. And these women became iconic sex symbols, and whatever it was. And when I was now I remember watching this when I was a teenager, like whatever it was. And it says 1993 here, which was, I graduated high school in 82. So in 1993, I started the meditation, the Sajmark meditation. I didn't have cable TV, so I had no way of watching this. So this is where it's kind of a weird Mandela effect, because I had this memory. It was a significant memory, because I remember watching this thing, and that I realized in my limited ability to realize this in my my teen years or whatever it was, that I had been duped, like that they had put these women out as the the ultimate possible relationship wife, whatever it is, right? Like your dream girl type of thing. And they were horrible people. They were much like the Kardashians are now, just superficial and just, when you saw these girls talking, like there's one thing to see a picture, glossed over, photoshopped picture, not photoshopped back then, but where they would airbrush it and they would do whatever they did on a physical level, and take so many different pictures to get the right angle and the right lighting and, these types of things, what they do with models. And, I didn't understand that then, that they were, pushing an ideal that the feminist women are really upset about now, like an ideal, not just for men, but for women to achieve. These ultra skinny models and these things who are, all they do is they're consumed with trying to look good. And they, they're just bad people. They're like, they're undeveloped people. Maybe not bad people, but they have nothing inside. They're not worth, you can't connect with them. They don't have a developed personality. Of course, a lot of them are young, in their late teens, early 20s. And they're just ditzy and, like this. I was like, oh, like these are not, I could never even have a conversation with one of these girls, right? Like, whatever it was. And I remember having this idea that they were like trying to, being manipulated by the way that they were using sexuality as a weapon on young men and, men in general, and putting, an artificial ideal based in, appearance, based in, unrealistic beauty. Like I had that kind of awareness, like all of a sudden it came into me, like I'm being duped, we're all being duped, right? But I remembered this girl because she said this thing here. The other piece to it here, she's going to say something coming up that I remembered hearing. Like this is well, let me show you this part first. When you see how these girls have to pose and do all this stuff, it's just so fake. Like it's not like there's some guys walking by, but like they're, this is them. I mean, the posing, like, when you see the picture, it's a still frame. Where you see how fake it, like how goofy that is, right? And I'm like, this is fucking goofy. This is fucking weird. You know, it's and this woman says she's a trooper.
She is a trooper.
She's a fucking trooper.
I'm getting punchy.
I try so hard to keep this just as a job, and it's what I do, and it's not what I am.
So I remember her saying that, like, and I thought, well, of all the girls that are there, like she was a little bit more conscious than the rest of them. Of course, I didn't know about Jeffrey Epstein, and and then all that. I mean, some self-awareness that this is just, something that you make money on, and you have like this, this, whatever it is, physical appearance that is worth something, but you have to be something more. And I didn't know about yoga at the time. That's why there's this weird sort of Mandela effect to this, because I remembered this being in high school, where I was maybe a little bit aware, and maybe in my first couple years of college. I'll talk about that more in a bit. But I didn't know about yoga, right?
I guess I'm someone that actively pursues change and growth. I think I'm a lot more at peace with myself. I'm a lot less affected by what's going on around me, really working towards finding that peace within. I've been alone, meaning without, a relationship, a boyfriend or anything for almost 2 years now.
Okay, so that is false because she was dating Jeffrey Epstein and getting roped by Trump. And so before I saw this one, so I think I was like, I think I remember that name. And the name it was something where, I had this moment where I realized, this whole thing about being duped by that they were, marketing to us like, man, like they were, and women too as well, that they were giving this kind of unreal expectations about something that, like a Stepford Wives kind of bullshit, right? And I was like, well, this is fucked, because it's just, they're manipulating you, like they're manipulating all of us. And then when this girl came out and said that she was different, like she had a little bit more consciousness, right? She was
Not just without a boyfriend, but I spend a lot of time.
So before this, I found this one because I searched for this. I found this other video, which is equally as interesting.
Veteran Stacey Williams, the weather created new opportunities for improvisation.
She weighs 100 pounds. Oh my gosh.
So this is the one I found first because I was looking for that clip where she said, "It's not who I am or it's not what I do. It's what I do and not who I am," which is a big thing. Like people who have shitty, weird jobs, the jobs that you're not passionate about, and really something like this is not, when you're. I mean, this is like limited for most of these women to a 2 to 5 year period, 7 years max, depending on how famous you become, where your physical appearance can be monetized in some way, like in a modeling type of situation, right? But again, like how real can she be if she's dating Jeffrey Epstein? Like, is there a bigger creep? Like, how can you do that, right? Like, that would be the equivalent to me as a 20-something-year-old dating somebody like Joan Rivers, like some ghoulish, Diane Feinstein, or one of these like old ghoulish people. Like Jeffrey Epstein is old and creepy as fuck. He just has that. He's arrogant and he's a horrible person. He's got that smirk and all that shit, and he has all this. He's a pedo and he's doing all this weird shit with these girls. She's basically prostituting herself. Like this is being a prostitute. You're dating him because he's a billionaire and whatever. Donald Trump, these girls. I mean, it's, you're young and you're doing this or whatever, but it's like fucking, you've like sold your soul, like you've sold your body, but like, to have those creepy people, like just the energy that they exude, the energy that you're being contaminated with your, interactions, with your intimacy with these creeps, right? Okay, so I went to eat breakfast, and Trump Trump is threatening to blow up some deal with the Washington Commanders football team in their stadium in Washington, D.C., which must have some sort of federal funding or something, if they don't change their name back to the Redskins. And he wants to take the Cleveland Indians and change their name, the Commander or Guardians, and back to the Indians, right? Now, Trump has a thing for Indians. He got into shit with their casinos, the Native American casinos. Like, I remember this back when I was younger, like really younger, when I lived in Connecticut, that area. And he just had a thing for them. Like, he was saying that they're not really Native Americans, that they were getting a better deal because he had the Atlantic City casinos and these other casinos. But then, I'm going to show you something with this, going back to the Stacey Williams thing. So I searched FBI pedophile symbols, and this is all they had, right? There's these symbols. Let me show you the other one here. These symbols were released. Here is the dissecting Pizzagate conspiracy theories. These symbols were released by the FBI. This was the FBI. This was, AKA boy lover. And we'll look at this symbol here. Remember this symbol here. But this is boy lover, which, a lot of this stuff, if you ever heard there's a woman, I forget her name, K something, maybe, I don't know. Don't tell me, don't care, don't need to know. But she was, and I'm sure these interviews don't exist anymore, but her husband was a colonel. And it talked about how there was all this, homoerotic gay stuff going on in the Marine Corps, where these generals and high-ranking military guys would recruit young Marines, what she called cherry Marines, for sex parties. And it started off with girls. But the boy lover stuff was like really what was going on. Like this, this old Greek stuff where they would, they would have sex with these, basically raping these teenage boys or whatever. There's this carryover from that in the elite society. And so there's this thing that happened with the Franklin scandal in Boys Town and Nebraska. And, there's just all this stuff. But when you used to search for this on Google, you'd get this symbol. These were the symbols that the FBI put out there. This is where FBI put out these symbols. And they're all, I'm using DuckDuckGo or whatever it's called. And they put these out, right? How these symbols were used. But now they're trying to diminish it to Pizzagate, but these were real things that were put out there. And this is, these are all, you can see the symbols over and over again. And Google has none of it. Like when it used to search this on Google, would show you this same research results, right? So keep that in mind. Let's go back to the Stacey Williams thing here.
Joking. Well, I always joke if there's.
Look at the symbol she's wearing here. It's the man-boy lover, right? Now I don't know what that thing is, the megazone is, but she's wearing the man-boy lovers thing in this Sports Illustrated, and she's dating Jeffrey Epstein, or she had just. This is from 1995, so she had dated him in 1995, and 1993, and then for whatever period of time that went on, and then 1995 she's wearing this. Probably this is 1994 when they're doing the shoot. They did it a year before. The other one's from 1992. And then the film and this HBO thing came out, and then when the Sports Illustrated calendar thing would come out, or whatever, the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue.
A shot, that involves danger or torture, it's usually mine.
But so it's clearly that symbol. It might be just coincidental, but it's a symbol the FBI associates with man-boy lover.
For me, actually, that's more interesting. It's a little bit more fun,
All right, so this somewhere in here, like there's other stuff. It gets into our yoga here.
I got into yoga because it clears the mind, it stills it, so that you can be living from more of a soul standpoint than an ego-driven standpoint.
Like, how does that track with dating Jeffrey Epstein, right?
The worst thing you can do as a model is to start believing the myth of who you are, who people think you are. I try and be the same person in front of the camera crews as I am with my friends and family.
I mean, you do all the fake posing. But, you know, that's like, it's a little bit, she's smarter and more consciously aware than a lot of these other, you know, dopey models who are just, you know, but still, she dated Jeffrey Epstein. So let me switch over to a voiceover here. So those of you who watch my videos know they have a really good memory. Like I, you know, can retrieve some of these things that I've just talked about before and said, maybe like not with names. Like that's one of the things that it's not you know, the names thing is not always there. But for everything else, I have a really good memory. But as you get older, your memories get distorted. And, you know, this idea that I had this memory from when I was, I think, like a, you know, like a, I would be like a senior in high school or maybe in college. So, you know, and when I think about things like this, it's like when I had cable TV. So my parents had cable TV in high school, and then I went away for a year of college in Florida. So when I this would be 1983. You know, I graduated in 1982. And in 1984, I came back and lived with my brother for a bit. And then somewhere around 1985 or 1986, I had cable again. I was renting a college apartment. I was talking to my wife about this, you know, yesterday in terms of all this stuff that, you know, that this memory I was having. And my roommate was a real scumbag. Like he ended up having like legal issues, and you know he was a drug dealer that didn't take drugs. He got involved where he was like a sort of a rent-a-cop kind of thing. He was like a policeman, but not someone who went through the police training. Like they hired extra people who were, you know, he had a friend who helped him get the job where he would do traffic guard stuff. So he was like one of those people who he got into guns. He went to train with like they had this Mossad training that I had no idea what the Mossad was back then, but he just started losing it and getting into guns and things like this, like you know, really into them, and had a lot of like weird issues. Was accused of a bunch of stuff and, you know, had some issues, but he was renting before that, like, you know, before he flipped out, he was renting an apartment. There was a bar called the Dean's Office, which was a real scummy college bar, like just this hole in the wall, in this dilapidated building. And there was an old guy who was a real mean old guy who wanted to claim he had, above the dean's office was 6 apartments, but he was so tired of renting to college kids, he rented one apartment to this one guy, but he didn't want anybody else living there. But this guy, you know, was always skirting the rules. My roommate, that you know, and this is how I met him. I started renting this apartment, and there was a 3-bedroom apartment, but he was the only one supposed to be in there, and I was paying $100 a month for this apartment, but I had to come up the back stairs because this old guy wouldn't see, and every once in a while the old guy would go in and see that there was mail for more than one person. And he was like, hey, I'm coming in there. There's a guy named Romano and a guy named, and there was all this mail that was just from past tenants, because, you know, he'd read off all these names. Usually they're people we didn't know. I'm coming out there to throw you out later on. He was like 90 years old, right? And the thing eventually burned down. And we were lucky we weren't in it when it did. The whole building burned down. And the guy had coated the floor with tar in the lower parts because there was water leakage. So he just put tar in there, like some kind of like driveway sealant, which was highly flammable. And the building went up, like, you know, they suspected arson because this guy was just a creep. This old guy was just a creep and probably a little bit senile. And so he probably burned the building down and the whole thing. Luckily, the dean's office used to be packed because it was right across from Central Connecticut State University. But, you know, we had cable because my roommate was stealing cable because he was just like one of those fucking kind of scumbag guys who was just, you know, was always finding an angle. And so I had cable then. Like, I remember watching the Thomas Hearns he fought this guy, I forget the guy's name from Boston, with a bunch of my friends on a black and white TV because I was the only one who had access to cable. They were all living on campus, right? So we were in my room watching this fight because it was on cable HBO. And so after that, I didn't have cable for a long time. Like, I don't know when I had cable again. And then I didn't have a TV in the 90s. When I moved, this was 1993, I started the Sajmarg meditation. So this gives a time reference. I'm saying this because of Mandela effect, because I have this memory of sometime in my, early period of life, I think, teenage years, high school, that I would have been interested in the Sports Illustrated swimsuit models. But in my 20s, I certainly wouldn't have been, right? But then, I remember this woman, Stacey Williams. I remember her talking about yoga because it was contrasting what they were saying, what everyone's saying, contrasting what these other models were acting like. Like, she had some self-awareness. But, like, of course, she's dating Jeffrey Epstein at the time. And so, my memory of my realization, because it's a profound realization, right? That, there's things I had realizations as a kid that, things about my parents and things that I didn't have the brain capacity to really understand what I was seeing. Like, I was seeing at a higher level than I was ready to be able to interpret the data, right? Like, when you're a young kid, you're a dummy, you're innocent, you just don't have the capacity to have some of these abstract thoughts and adult concepts, but you kind of have them, like, you can kind of have them where you wake up like this is an awakening moment. And I realized that, and later on one of my roommates was, this was probably in the middle 90s, 94, 95. After I started Sajmarg, I lived in a shared house. The guy was a counselor, and he was talking about how, he worked where he had these kids he would take out, troubled kids, out to these auroros in New Mexico. So I had moved to New Mexico. And I had a guy I worked with that did the same thing. He was a former football player. I've told some stories about that. And they both did this job where they would take kids out to the wilderness, and the kids would just break away from their parents. Like, this one guy took rich kids out. The guy who was my roommate and the other guy I worked with took poorer kids out. And the richer kids would break away from their family dynamics. And, this guy said that a lot of these kids' mothers, the boys' mothers, would sleep with the boys, not sexually, like when they were like teenagers. Like, weird stuff. Like, they were trying to emasculate their sons because they hated their husbands. Like, these were really rich people. And he said that there was a common, like, all these kids who came through his work that he did. And he'd take these kids out to, the middle of the wilderness, and they would be out there away from all the bullshit. And this is before the internet, but it's, all the stuff. And after a while, they would just become like real kids. They would, like, they had to do all this work. They were camping, cooking meals, and, they had to do all this survival stuff. And they just break away from their connections, their family stuff, and they would just they become real people. Like, they would have to, they stopped being like NPCs that were all, programmed by society. And I don't know how some of these programs have been abusive, and I don't think they're all effective, but, the work was there. But this guy was saying to me, that in every other culture, especially ancient cultures, they have a rite of passage. Like, you're a Maasai in Africa, and you had to kill a lion. Like, you had to go out and kill a lion, right, to become a man. Like, there's all these things that they would do. We know about, like, bar mitzvahs and things like that. But in the American culture, they don't really do anything to acknowledge you becoming a teenager and then an adult. Like, you get a driver's license, or you get to go into bars. All of a sudden you get all these, but there's none of these rite of passage rituals to acknowledge that you are going from one part of life to another. You're transitioning to a different level of consciousness. And I always thought that was interesting because it's true. Like, this stuff should be acknowledged, because when you become a teenager, you're completely different than being a kid. And then when you become an adult, you're completely different than being a teenager. Like, you've entered into this different realm more is expected of you. And, you know, there's things like graduating high school or starting college or graduating college. You know, there's these moments that you have, but there's no awareness to, you know, any of these moments. And a big part of that is, you know, how do you find your significant other? It's a huge part. It's a big part of all the movies, like all these things. You know, how do you find the love of your life? Like, how do you identify? How do you look for them? And our society is so superficial that if you think about, you know, the number one way, like the number one thing that's being pushed out there, you know, these supermodels or these, you know, whatever it is. And now, of course, it's being twisted to all this gender stuff and, you know, they, them, and he, her, and all these things and all these different, you know, sexual orientations that they have, right? Like pansexual and all these types of things. Like now these young kids are getting like an array of all these different ways of looking at it. And they don't see a traditional marriage anymore. So it's got even more perverted or deranged. But, you know, the way that it was pitched to you as a guy was that you were supposed to be looking for some sort of, you know, the swimsuit model type of, you know, movie starlet type of beautiful woman, that it was, you know, just superficial in nature, right? I mean, something I realized later in life, you know, when I started doing this stuff with Michelle Obama and we started seeing a change in all these things. And there was these various modeling shows on TV. And it was clear that the modeling industry was mostly run by gay men and that the modeling industry was grosser, much grosser than even Hollywood and politics. The modeling industry is like just where a lot of this stuff came out in terms of this new sexual identity kind of stuff that came out in 2015 or whatever it is. And that the women who were modeling that were seen as especially these runway models, you know, they look like 14-year-old boys, right? They look like, you know, they had the bodies of, you know, they're usually really, really hyper skinny, anorexic, and, you know, just they look like little boys because that's what the men who were pushing these, you know, who were running the industry, the gay dudes that were running the industry, thought of as the pinnacle of being, you know, sexual attractiveness. And so, you know, and then all these women who look like dudes or possibly could be dudes that are celebrities, and then the men dressing up in dresses, like there's this whole weirdness that's there, right? But the initial part is that there were these bombshells in the 50s and the 60s, and then, you know, they've kind of warped this stuff, that there was this unobtainable beauty that, you know, the superficial, in terms of the, you know, men having an attractiveness that's based in eyesight and based in vision. And they, you know, they use that to create this, you know, not just for men, like men thinking this was like what you were supposed to be looking for in terms of a wife, you know, in terms of your, you know, attractiveness to women, but then what women were supposed to achieve, like the women complain about this, feminists, right? This unachievable beauty that's, you know, like takes hours and hours of working and starving yourself because, you know, women aren't supposed to look like that. They're not supposed to be, you know, this, you know, whatever, like that kind of level of being skinny and these things. Starving yourself, working out, getting any kind of number of plastic surgeries and all this stuff that they're trying to do and never developing as a person. Like spending all your time in creating a physical package. But if you look at the woman's eyes, like she's dead inside. Like there's no inner beauty. They don't have anything to offer. Like these Kardashians and these models and these, you know, women who are looking to package themselves, you know, in what they look like and not putting any effort into becoming like a human being, and then being really shitty wives and mothers, you know, trophy wives and mothers. And they're looking for some guy who's successful and rich and whatever, you know, that you see the you know, the feminist, the you know, the Lifetime movies that are, you know, these kind of movies that are these romantic comedies and movies that are, you know, based in what women are supposed to want, and these unrealistic ideas of these guys who are, you know, usually narcissistic, sociopathic type of men, And so, like, there's a range of this, but you see that there's, when they're trying to make somebody desirable in a movie, a leading man or a leading woman, of course, now they're taking this to another level of degradation with the way these kids are being sexualized. And, it's all tied to superficial shit. There's no emphasis on what kind of soul the person has, what kind of spirit they have, what kind of, what's inside of them, right? Like, you don't have any way of, there's no, just like with the lack of rituals and, rite of passages, there's no way that you haven't had any training. Of course, your parents have shitty marriages for the most part, ending in divorce and all these things. And so you don't have a reference point at how you do this. Like, how do you find the right person? And what do they have inside of them? What is the connectivity that you have with them? Past life stuff, and that where you resonate with, what's inside of them. Like, whatever's inside of you resonates with inside of them, and you have these connections, and you have these, goals. The other thing is that people are so lost. When you're marrying somebody in the 20s, even early 30s, the person hasn't even figured out what they're supposed to do here and why they're here, and may never figure it out. And, people are lost. And, then all of a sudden they have some sort of an awakening. That's happening a lot now. Of course, in the truth community, but in other ways you can awaken. And now you're no longer on the same page with the person. And so, that's why all our marriages are doomed. A high divorce rate, yes, but like, how many good marriages are there where, the marriage itself is solid and the people have found the right person? Because they don't know how to find the right person, right? So you have two people who aren't really supposed to be married that aren't suitable for each other, with no training, right? With no training and, and how to be a parent and how to be a spouse, and, the society that is, so fucked up on every level. So then the family breaks up because the kids aren't getting what they need because the parents are incompetent and don't have a clue how to be adults. And like, this whole thing is a mess, purposefully done so that people will never, become a natural human being. They won't ever have time to connect to God because they can't even figure out how to choose a spouse and how to, choose a job and, a purpose. And you don't have any real sense of any of this stuff. And you don't have a good example. You don't have a reference point of competent people in your parents because they all sucked. And imagine these kids, the kids of the kids now, these kids who are so fucked up now and depressed, and these kids, who are when they have children, how fucked are those children, right? Because they have no shot of anything that resembles a normal life because their parents are completely clueless and depressed and have psychological issues and growing up with no hope. And so, inevitably you have the complete breakdown of society on a moral level, on a spiritual level, physical level, because of all these things that have been manipulated. They've taken, the wholesomeness and the naturalness out of all these things. And it starts with, a big part of the American culture and the American movies is about, these romantic people coming together, the man and the woman coming together. And a couple now, it's no longer just a man and a woman, it's any number of things. These kids are getting a whole array of this. But it's that, the meeting of the future partners, or, the future husband and wife or whatever it is, right? Like, that's so important in TV shows, that moment where they get together, right? In the Jump the Shark category, they had a category called They Did It, which meant like there's this flirtation and there's, are they going to get together? And this keeps people engaged in the storyline. But once they get together, the story's over. Like, everything's about the choosing and the dating and finding the one that you love, and then it leads to marriage and like all these happily ever after. The happily ever after is that there's nothing interesting that happens after you've found that person. And that's when the story really begins, like just with the spiritual journey. You step on the spiritual path, and finding your way to God is sometimes it used to be a bigger storyline than it is now, but still it's there. But it's not that you found God, that now the hard part starts. Now the real story starts. And once you find your significant other and you get married, that's when the real story starts. That's when the difficulty starts, right? I mean, it's hard enough for now with all how fucked up they've made everybody to find your real person, like find like your soulmate or whatever you want to call it. And, that's whatever. But on top of that, there's, like that isn't even it. That's the beginning of the story. And in American culture, that's when the story ends. Because they have no interest. People don't have any interest in the mundane bullshit that you have to go through. That's the real challenge. And so, this is all a part of that. I want to get to Trump's depravity here. I'm going to show images of him. I have all these images of him with women. And so, like, this is, I just want to go back to this Mandela effect. So, I didn't have cable TV and a TV at all right before I started the meditation. So, I was dating this woman I was engaged to for a while. And, 1991 or whatever it was, maybe early 1992. And then moved out, and I didn't have a TV. Like, I didn't have a TV. I didn't watch TV in my 20s all that much. And then, so I don't know how I saw this. Like, the dates aren't right. And, my memory of it doesn't line up with the events, but I did see it. Like, I did see the first one I showed you, not the one where she had the pedo symbol. That was from 1995, but the one from 1993 I did. And so, I had thought that this woman was somewhat different, like a little bit more conscious than the other dopes, these other swimsuit models. And the contrast was cool because of, how Stepford wivey and how superficial they were, right? How Kardashian they were. Of course, I didn't know about the Kardashians then. But she was the conscious one, and she's dating Jeffrey fucking Epstein and getting groped by Trump. Like, you can see that, obviously, I mean, her doing yoga and her being a little bit more aware, that's one thing. But, like, even then, she's prostituting herself because it's a big fucking mess. And now, so many years later, all this stuff comes out, and, we now know about Epstein, and Trump is fucking president, and this whole thing. So, again, it's just bizarre. Okay, so 2 days ago, my wife sent me this. This has been going around the internet. Trump kissing a child, forcing himself on child. How much proof does the world need? Donald Trump jail tracker just trying to drop this Miss Teen USA pageant picture right here. I put this picture into ChatGTP, and it couldn't say whether it had been doctored or faked or not, which is weird. Like, because it, should have that capability. And so I don't know if this picture is true or not, right? But there are many creepy pictures of Trump and his daughter and Trump and women in general, which I've been just showing you. These are just the collections over the years. The guy is always surrounded by young women that would be considered beautiful, right? Superficially beautiful, like I said. These, women that put all this effort into their physical appearance. And he likes them young. Trump's always around younger women. Again, he's in his 80s now. And he's always talking about, she's so good looking, he's so good looking. And he's very aware of people's looks. He's very superficial, right? But, the creepy stuff that he had, let me go to, let me show his daughter here.
It would be really disappointing. Not really. But it would depend on what was inside the magazine.
If she posed, it would be fine. But if they put her picture on...
Yeah, but it depends on what goes inside the magazine.
Well, see, that's her gripe. That's this girl's gripe.
And
people assume there'll be nude photos.
Right, you do assume that with Playboy.
Okay,
but if there weren't, you wouldn't have an issue with it then. If they were using her to...
I don't think Ivanka would do that inside the magazine, although she does have a very nice figure. I've said that if Ivanka weren't my daughter, perhaps I'd be dating her.
Stop it! Oh, it's so weird. Stop
You know what? You are sick.
Isn't that terrible?
Well, you're known for saying outrageous things, Mr. Trump.
Who are you, Woody Allen?
They used to love Trump on The View. And Joe Rogan pointed this out, how all these people used to love Trump and they hated him. And he made it sound like because he was taking on the elite. But they shouldn't have loved him. The guy was, there's all these pictures of him and his daughter, and there's all these people that talk about, there's a guy now who's, been interviewed, and he was with Trump, and Trump hasn't sued him, and he talked about being with Trump at the Miss Teen USA, and Trump would inspect all the girls, and he would like the ones that looked like Ivanka, like he had a thing. He said this long before any of this stuff came out. He said this during Trump's first run for president. And then it's come out, this one girl who said that she was abused by Trump based on Jeffrey Epstein, and that video's disappeared. I don't know if there's any legitimacy, just like I don't know if there's legitimacy to that picture of Trump kissing that girl. But you don't need to make anything up. Like, there's enough video evidence of Trump saying and doing, and I mean, he said he could just walk up to women and grab them by the pussy. You think he never did that, right? Like, he said that in a way he was bragging. And then, when this Stacey Williams, Jeffrey Epstein's ex-girlfriend, says this story and all these other women do, it becomes real believable because Trump said it, right? And Trump has a weird thing with young women, and he was besties with Jeffrey Epstein. And that's all you need to know. Like, if this was Bill Clinton, or if this was Joe Biden, and Joe Biden has his own creepy shit with all those women and the stuff that he did, all those girls, those snoozling and sniffing their hair and all that fucking weird shit he did. They're all fucking weird, right? But Trump has been given a pass by the people who are most concerned about Epstein. It's fucking hilarious that these dumb fuck Trumpers just keep on, buying into this guy. Like, he is the fucking creep, and no matter how desperate you are to save the country or whatever, it's just not, I mean, it's just fucking wrong. And so, it's just so fucking wrong. And so, I want to end this thing with Israel too, because there's a Israeli component here. I just want to say a few more things here though. Trump is a, admitted degenerate, and guys who buy, 50-year-old men who buy the Miss USA and Miss Teen USA pageant and then insert himself into the process. Rich people buy shit like that, but they don't become part of the story. Like, Trump was at all these pageants, and, those pageants are horrific. They're unwatchable. It's really fucking weird shit that they do, the beauty pageants. It's just like, it's really goofy. It should be like, it's just so stupid. Like all this, like the shit I just showed you with the swimsuit models. It's like watching Entertainment Tonight or any of these shows. It's so fucked up. It's so like, it's just so gross and so stupid. Like, they're insulting your intelligence. And, all the programming that goes with it. And Trump is the epitome of this gross Jabba the Hutt-like fucking creature. Big, fat, rich piece of shit, gross, like he's gross. Like, he smells bad, like he's just a fucking gross guy. And, he's being touted as some kind of hero and the reincarnation of Jesus by these fucking Trumpers, even though it's all right there, right in their fucking faces, right? And it's been there forever. Like, you don't need any more evidence. And you don't need to make anything up. And Trump has admitted to being this guy. He brags about it. And so, the fact that his approval rating's gone up, it's just nothing more to see here. But there's this thing with Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson now talking about Israel. And like I always say, it's not an accident, like when things like this come up. But Israel is now being targeted by the far left. They're upset about the genocide and the Palestinian people. Over 100,000 dead, 30,000 of them children, this thing. And, all the rest of these things. And people are questioning the relationship and the finances. And I said they have a limited time before America collapses, Israel does, to make themselves into a superpower. But you see this transition happening, whatever it is. Let me show you this one meme here. So this meme came up with Jeffrey Epstein. Look at how creepy he is. Like, just fucking gross. Like, these are three gross pieces of shit here. And Jeffrey Epstein just looks like the most evil fuck amongst the three. Like, just how bad he was. And then Trump here, there's a Mossad connection here between Epstein and, whatever the story is that people are saying that they have factual proof of and all these things. And it's coming out for some reason. Like, this stuff is not... I always ask the question, why do I know this? Like, why is this being put in front of us? Like, it's not like this information just leaks. Why is this information being put out there? because you can't do anything about it. Like Epstein could be proven that there's a connection between Mossad and Epstein and these fucking clowns and all these other things. And, all of it. And still, it doesn't matter, right? What difference does it make? Because they get away with it. So, Master Chargy, the third master of the Sage-Mark system, said that sexual perversion is always, a big topic in spirituality, right? In religions and spirituality. It's because that's what takes people down and takes institution organizations down, spiritual people, and all of it because of the power of the the sexual urges. I mean, there's a God-given system in which there needs to be proliferation of the species. I don't know why I had trouble. Proliferation of the species, right? And because of that, you have this very strong urge, which is, to procreate. I mean, biological animals have it. And you also have the pleasure that goes along with it, the pleasure associated with it. And so when pleasure becomes, the pursuit of pleasure gets out of hand, we're long past that in our modern day culture, where people are just looking for pleasure at any level, any recourse. And it becomes, you see this with, there was that movie called Men, Women, and Children. I only watched it once. I started looking at it again, and I couldn't, it was so depressing. But it was a movie on the early effects of the internet. And a lot of it had to do with sexual perversion. There was a girl who was in high school, and she was sort of the head cheerleader type of, whatever. And her mom was selling, pornographic pictures of her to promote her daughter. And she dated the captain of the quarterback of the football team, who was, so it was like this dream couple. And that guy couldn't get aroused by her because he was into deviant pornography. And these kids who are growing up on pornography, this, internet pornography, everything starts as a gateway drug. And it just gets grosser and grosser. Just like when you start using drugs, you start off with alcohol and pot, and then you end up on heroin. This is the idea that it escalates. And not for everybody, but it does for, most of these kids on porn. There's this great, the great porn experiment. There's a TED Talk by this guy, I think his name is Gary Wilson. And, it talks about the binge mechanism and all these things that play into pornography, and the idea of these urges that you have inside of you, these binge for. I've talked about this with sweets and sugar, sugar and fat. That sugar and fat, sugar which is energy, and fat which you need, and you see most wild animals and they're skinny, and even if they have a big coat of fur, if you see like a polar bear shaved, you'd be like, oh my God, right? Like a lot of these animals, they're not, there's not a lot of animals that are fat. And certainly animals don't get obese. And, they try to put on fat maybe for the winter or whatever it is, storing food, hibernating, things like this. But, they just don't, animals just aren't fat because there's not a lot of fat available. And we've created a way to get cheap fat, which our body craves. When you come across sugar or fat, you're supposed to gobble it up because you won't come across it again. Like it's like it's like finding gold. And so you have these natural compulsions for things. And you see these things when you go to the checkout line, they're selling sex, they're selling, gossipy, sexy, whatever kind of magazines, and they're selling sugar and sweets and fat and all these things. These are impulse items because you're triggered, your body is mechanically oriented to consume these things when you get it. You have this binge mechanism in your system, and you have these compulsions hardwired into you. And then you have the psychological deviation and people just getting crazy and getting weird about shit like sexually and, with food and any of these other things, to where like it becomes, perversion and horrific, like, horror movie stuff and, getting into like snuff films and whatever kind of stuff it is, right? And people watching horror movies and, like liking the blood and the fucking evil and the fear and all this shit. Like people have this, demented, we've been twisted in so many different ways. This is what I was talking about at the beginning. Like we've just been twisted into unnatural, perverted type of, versions of ourselves that are much lower and grosser than we would be in another society, another, culture. And, we have this pleasure-based system that's completely materialistic, ignoring the soul. And we've seen a complete breakdown of everything in our society. And Trump is kind of like the epitome of that person, right? He's just that guy. You can see it in every capacity, and Jeffrey Epstein and these people, whatever connection there is to Israel and all of it, right? And, they've wired the system, the people who control it, so that without them controlling it, it implodes because it's based in illusion and depravity. And if they don't keep on delivering that for people, the illusion and the depravity and all of it, the system implodes, it collapses. It's like that face hugger from the Alien movie. If you cut the thing off, it bleeds acid and it goes through the host, it killing the host. Plus, it tightens its tail around the host's neck, and so the thing's got its fingers around the host's head, and it's got a tube going down the host's his mouth and esophagus into the gut. This whole thing, right? You've seen the movies, right? So, and the people who run the system, that's how they have it wired. Like if the system goes down, they're going, if they're going down, the system's going down with them, right? This idea of too big to fail. The too big to fail means that if you allow these banks to collapse, it'll take down the economy. And so no matter what has to happen, no matter what kind of fucking bullshit things you have to do, no matter how much lies and wars and other things that have to happen to, stop these banks from going down, you have to stop it. And it isn't that, the world would end, the earth wouldn't end, and people wouldn't end. You just have to invent a new system. And, with spirituality as its base would be the inevitable upswing. And Cro-Magnon man, caveman shit, you would be the other way. Like you can go either way. Humans can go either way at any time. And we usually don't go the right way. And so, let me just wrap this one up here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paramano, definitely pointing for the apocalypse. And the ascension, everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.